Here's part 2 to a video that no one watched, but I like Severance and I want to talk about it more. And I wanted to begin part 2 by addressing all of the mistakes that I made in part 1 of this video. So apparently I said James instead of James, as in James Egan, which is a completely irredeemable mistake and ruins the validity of anything that I've ever said or ever will say. However, I will say that when I was up for 48 hours straight trying to proofread all the names and just everything about Severance, IMDb actually says James Egan. So that's where I made my mistake, was using IMDb to proofread. Because sleep deprived me trying to get out this video was like, oh, the internet, it never lies. What? And let's see what else I got wrong. And let's see right here. Oh, nothing. Oh, that makes sense, because I'm a perfect human being. Anyway, I wanted to build upon what I was talking about in part 1. Also, there's gonna be spoilers. Speaking of Ben Stiller, according to a guy who directed like more than half this season, Ben Stiller, the creator of the show, Dan Erickson, approached Stiller and his company with the script like 5 years ago. And getting Severance into production was actually a very challenging thing, because when they were about to start shooting, a thing called 2020 happened. And we all know how that went. And they were actually shooting during this thing called the pandemic. I don't know if any of you are familiar. During an interview with Trevor Noah, Stiller reflected on filming Severance during the pandemic. How they were apparently shooting in this bubble where they had to enter the COVID tent and then walk like 5 minutes down these white hallways to get to the studio, where there's this massive set of white hallways. So the cast and crew of Severance were basically entering the set like the Severin employees going to work. This would explain why the town of Cure seems very, what's the word, unpopular? No, wait, that's the term I was referred to in high school. Oh yeah, unpopulated, that's the word. Other than the Lumen building, the entire town seems pretty empty. But this could just be due to the fact that Severance was shot during that one global pandemic. It's already been announced that season 2 of Severance is gonna happen. So what in the freak is gonna happen in season 2? Since making part 1 of this video, I had a lot of time to think about what's going to happen next season. I'm just gonna go ahead and make the assumption that the MDR department must have not just been displayed at the gala. It wasn't just a one-time thing, this was probably part of a campaign. Milchick has always been taking photos of this crew ever since Dylan was initiated into the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They all must have been part of this large campaign for shareholders and investors. This is why Helly was specifically brought into the MDR department in the first place. PD escaped from Lumen and reintegrated, so it would look extremely bad when he started leaking information or, you know, showed up dead. So the daughter of James Egan, was brought in as the ultimate move to show everyone that the chip was safe and not dystopic in any way, shape, or form. Because if the up-and-coming CEO is using the product on herself, then the public and the rest of the friends of Lumen will trust it and be like, oh, I guess it's pretty cool. Lumen and James obviously need Helena to go back to the severed floor, but they also need everyone else to go back into the office as well. Because it would look incredibly suspicious if they just got rid of the entire MDR department after they were just put on display, especially after this PR nightmare. If anything, they need to double down on Helly Zinni being happy and being like her sister or whatever. You know, I thought it would be Miss Cobell to tackle Helly at the end there, because we saw that Miss Cobell was extremely reckless, like her exiting a vehicle while it was still in drive as we were all convinced a child was in there. But the person to tackle Helly was Natalie, the same person who is the face of the strong Severance debate, a debate that is still getting a lot of resistance from the public. The desperate move of tackling Helena may have just ruined her career, as the public has now seen her physically silence a whistleblower. Lumen might be forced to drop Natalie as this PR person because it will damage the company if they keep her in the public, because I'm pretty sure she just ruined her reputation. Natalie had direct contact with the board, so maybe she'll stay on with the company, but it'll be like behind the scenes, who knows? All I know is that I know nothing. Socrates. Apparently he didn't actually know if he said that or not. Fun fact. But all I know is that the innies of Dylan, Irving, Helly, and Mark may get wiped. Irving's outie painting the testing floor hallways, a good indication that even supposedly wiped memories can still seep through. So if their memories get wiped in season 2, their innies may still feel or remember parts of what happened in season 1. It's almost as if their characters will become more fragmented like the Cubist artwork as the series continues. However, if the innies all get clean slated, the events in season 1 weren't for nothing. Mark's outie was about to back out of his position at Lumen, but he and everyone else at the book reading now know that his wife is still alive. Mark is going to have to go back to Lumen in order to keep up close-up appearances. Cobell wasn't there during Mark's revelation, so Devin, Mark, and everyone else need to just play it cool, so Mark can plan to get Gemma out of there. Mark is going to be in contact with Ragabi again, and he will be put on this journey to finish what Petey started. And by the way, can we just take a moment to acknowledge how much of an enigma Rickon is this season? Mark forgot his book at home, and then Rickon over here just made such a freaking big deal about it and calculated the time of Mark needing to go home to get the book. It appears that everyone who showed up to this cult of a reading already had their own book, and then we see this massive stack of books right here. So it's like, Mark gonna just borrow a book from that? So Rickon, please explain yourself to the audience as to why you're such a Anyway, I mentioned before that Rickon's book is the antithesis of the Compliance Handbook. Something they did to better help signify this is that one is red and one is blue. These colors are intentionally used so that they can have this sci-fi trope that was derived from the Matrix, where a character named Morpheus offers another character named Neo a choice between a red pill or a blue pill. If you take the blue pill, you're gonna remain asleep and continue living in that prison of yours. And if you take the red pill, yeah, the opposite's gonna happen. You will learn the unpleasant truths of reality and see the world for what it really is. You can think of it as an awakening. The primary color we see during the not dinner is red, and Mark can even be seen wearing a red sweater. The color red in Severance is supposed to represent Mark becoming more awake or illuminated. Do you get it? Because it's like lumen. This explains a lot of the use of the color red throughout the season. One of my favorite shots that utilize the color red in this way is this shot of Mark outside of Devin's place in episode 8. During Petey's funeral, we see a video of him and his daughter playing Enter Sandman by Metallica. The original version of the song was about like crib death, but the lyrics were changed to make it sound more appropriate to general audiences. When discussing the meaning behind the song, James Hetfield claimed that he wanted more of a mental thing where this kid gets manipulated by what adults say. And you know when you wake up with the in your eye that's supposedly been put in there by the Sandman to make you dream? So the guy in the song tells this little kid that, and he kind of freaks. He can't sleep after that, and it works the opposite way. The meaning behind this song could relate to the characters exiting work with injuries that they can't explain. The song is also about a child headed off to Neverland, like the childlike innies on the severed floor. Sleep with one eye open is the lyric that stands out to me the most. The use of this lyric made it emblematic of the fact that one side of a severed employee is asleep and the other side is awake. In the intro of the show, Mark is wearing some red pajamas and running around the MDR department. Then the intro ends with that red pajama version of himself molding with his normal self while they're in bed together. Mark and his innie morphing together in bed is some very important imagery, because Irving over here is experiencing nightmares about his Audi's paintings every time he dozes off. Something that was added to the handbook was that no workplace should be repurposed for slumber. Every time a severed employee sleeps, they must be able to access certain parts of their brain that are only available to their Audi. So sleep may be the answer for the innie to start getting to know the memories of their Audi. Kier's original vision was seeing all of the departments working together. I couldn't help but notice that there's this compliance handbook, right? And then there's like 3 other editions that were later added on. So it's pretty clear that Lumen has strayed very far away from Kier's initial guidelines and teachings. Bert even claims that he's more of a first edition kind of guy, meaning the OG compliance handbook has already been altered. I feel like even though there's a very good chance that Kier was out of his mind, he still had a different vision for Lumen than how it's currently being run. Severance is clearly deconstructing the toxic cult-like work culture our society has somewhat grown accustomed to, almost hitting you over the head with the commentary, like how on the microchip packaging it's written, "Don't live to work. Work to live." By the way, that scene where Mark receives a gift card for getting that one thing thrown at his head hit me harder than that thing getting thrown at Mark's head. I remember there was this one time where I was a young impressionable teenager working at Ralph's, and I had this one manager that would make me do things that were not part of the job description, like cleaning out maggot-filled spaces under the loading area in the back, or removing mold from under the produce department. You'd be surprised at how much mold is actually down there. Oh, here's the most ridiculous one. Individually picking up helicopter seeds out of the mulch areas in the parking lot because the upper management people were coming in the next day and the manager wanted everything to be perfect. So I ended up picking these like helicopter seeds out of the mulch until the point where my hands were bleeding. Because for any of these tasks, I was given no proper equipment, just a broom and a dream. And then after a few months of this, the assistant manager took notice and then gave the manager for it. And then the manager came up to me like he was doing it out of some random act of kindness and handed me like a $25 gift card and was like, this is the greatest gift I could ever bestow upon an employee. So after inhaling mold, spray paint, and then bleeding for this job, I received a gift card. So yeah, I can empathize pretty hard with Mark. Speaking of inhumane work conditions, Lumen prevents workers from knowing that they have a family on the outside to further convince them that their fellow employees and Lumen are their family. Because when severed employees discover that they actually have a real family, they suddenly prioritize getting to know them for some reason. Gosh, it's weird why people would want to choose their actual family over their work. When discussing the break room, Dylan and Helly were talking about the voices they heard behind the door. Dylan heard a crying baby, and Helly heard an angry, mumbling guy. The innies can still feel the emotions of their outies, so these sounds must be unique to each employee in the break room. The angry, mumbling guy has to be Helly's father, and the crying baby must sound like one of Dylan's children. This is done to elicit an emotional response from them, in order to have them feel actually sorry and have them become more agreeable. You know what? It's hard to tell how much of what Miss Casey was saying during the wellness checks was actually true. She claims that Irv loves music and has many records, even though he's only listening to the same song, Ace of Spades, every time we see him at his place. But this could just be due to the fact that he's still suffering from some trauma that was brought on by his experience at Lumen. Miss Casey made it seem like Irv was a pretty popular guy, but as we know, he appeared to live a very lonely life. At times, it comes across like Lumen is bending the truth, like saying Irv's outie loves the sound of Radar, without providing that context that Radar is a dog. Lumen is outright lying to Mark's outie over here, as Mark thinks that he's working in the archives division as a corporate historian, something that's related to his previous job that he clearly misses, as he can be seen staying up late, drinking, and scrolling through news articles about the college that he used to work at. With Ian needing to react to each fact equally during the wellness sessions, it's safe to assume that each checkup isn't just to improve the work experience, as much as it is to make sure that the memories aren't seeping through. Lumen is really polite and pleasant to the outies, but really blunt and cold to the innies, just to further emphasize how oppressive Lumen is to its severed employees. So I love that moment where Cobell was like,
you know, maybe I could drive my own car, and that way I could leave if I'm uncomfortable or afraid.
You know, the one luxury she takes away from the severed employees. So with all this mistreatment of the severed employees, the moment that got me during the finale was when Helly looks into the mirror and apologizes to herself by reciting the same apology that she had to say 1,072 times. Dylan keeping this one card was a pretty big deal. I know this because Milchick lost the book The UUR, which is contraband, but he still didn't seem to really care. But then Dylan takes this card, and suddenly Milchick uses the overtime contingency protocol on Dylan to find out where he hid it. There are rumors circulating around the severed floor that years ago all the departments, slaughtered each other. During the waffle party, we see a reenactment of Kier taming the four tempers. So who's to say that Lumen wouldn't try to recreate another painting in a very ceremonious type of way? These cards may have something to do with preparing the severed employees to fight each other. You know why I think Severance was such a success? It wasn't trying to be this grand, larger than life, like huge, like wide scope kind of thing. Yeah, it's dealing with like a mind-bending concept, but it still remains grounded in its own way. And it took its time with the characters. That's what made them so likable by the end. This show is a prime example of how you can build so much tension by putting the character drama first. Anyway, that's the end of part 2. I hope you liked it.